This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit podcast. I'm Kay Savitz. As I've researched Atari and its 8-bit computer projects over the years, one name has come up over and over again, attached to the most interesting projects: Linda S. Gordon. Executive Director of Atari Computer Camps, Linda. Executive Producer of The Magic Room, Atari's movie about those camps, Linda. Atari's collaboration with Club Med to offer computer labs at vacation destinations, Linda again. Atari Club, the fan group that published Atari Age magazine, Linda launched that. More recently, in my interview with Ann Lewin-Benham of the Capitol Children's Museum, Linda's name came up once again. She was the liaison between Atari and the museum. Linda worked on the most interesting projects. Today, her name is Linda Brownstein. Linda joined Atari in December 1980 as Vice President of Special Projects, where she worked on most of the projects that I mentioned before. In October 1983, she became Senior Vice President in Atari's Education Group. She left the company in July 1984 after Jack Tramiel took over the company. This interview took place on April 21st, 2021.
My career before I started at Atari and after I left Atari was all in financial services. I was a securities analyst, portfolio manager, entrepreneur, and starting an investment management company, and was in Boston. And my then husband and I were moving out to California. And my mentor in my career had been a man named Manny Girard, whose name you certainly have come across many times if you've been doing research on Atari.
Sure.
He was my rabbi godfather, one of the most brilliant teachers I've ever had the privilege of having in my life. And he is mentoring a couple of our kids too. Anyway, Manny was then in the office of the president of Warner Communications and had been on Wall Street before. The best boss I ever had, Larry Lasser, when I was at the Putnam Management Company, said when I was just starting out as a securities analyst, and I was doing my first industry review on the broadcasting industry. And he said, if Manny Girard, who's no longer on Wall Street, will give you even 15 minutes, it's worth all the time you'll have with everybody else on Wall Street combined. And so I called him up, and I became what I came to call one of Manny's babies. He had a whole collection of us who he mentored, and many of us knew each other, and he was everything Larry said. My first meeting with him, I think, was 2 hours, not 15 minutes. And then when I was moving out to California, he said, well, why don't you think about going to work for Atari? He was in charge of Atari for Warner at the time, and Ray Kassar was our CEO. And I said, well, why not? I had been working, my last job had been as an entrepreneur, doing literally everything in a small investment management firm with Jerry Jordan and Warren Hellman. And it sounded very exciting to me, but I certainly had never worked in industry. I went and met Ray Kassar, and he hired me as Vice President of Special Projects and reporting directly to him. And I was basically hired to do whatever Ray needed doing and things that might have been sensitive. My first job was, he said, the first thing I need you to do is I need you to go, not only go with us to CES, but I need you to do two things. One, to go to New York and meet the people at Club Med. And then I need you to also, while you're in New York, you and a guy I'm going to give you to work with you named Bob Kahn. I want you to go and talk to the people at this company that does summer camps and think about how you can start Atari computer camps. So those were my first two assignments. My first day at work was torrential downpour. and he put me in a building that literally had no one else in it. It was this giant building in Silicon Valley. And it was like, I called it the ghost building because phones kept ringing all day long, but there were no people there except for me. At the end of the day, I went to Ray. I said, I don't care what you do, but get me out of that building and into the building with you. I said, I'll be happy to even be in a closet, but just get me out of that building. So I did all of those jobs that he told me. I met a man now of blessed memory named Pierre Chemla, who worked for Club Med, who was also I guess this kept happening with Atari all the time. You just met the most interesting people in the world, not only the people you work with, but inside the company, but outside the company. Pierre was an executive for Club Med. I also met Serge Trigano, who was at that time running Club Med in the North American zone. His father, Gilbert Trigano, was the founder of Club Med. And Pierre spoke 8 languages. He was an electrical engineer. He was a master of systems of signs, astrology, Kabbalah, runes, Sanskrit. I mean, you name it. He was an expert. He had done astrology readings for the Queen of England. He was he could read palms. He was an expert in also in those the cards. Tarot cards, yes. And he was also a psychic. And I witnessed him do things that were just unbelievable. And Pierre and I built computer workshops in Club Med all over the world. And it was a time when microcomputing was just starting. And our basic model, which our first village that we built in was in Ixtapa, Mexico. We started in the North American zone. And we gave classes in microcomputing as one of the activities at Club Med. And at that time, if you go back to old Club Med catalogs, you'll see, computer as one of the things. And we were making it fun. We did the training of all the gentil organisateurs, the GOs, the people who work there. And we actually sent people there ourselves to work with them, to get everybody trained and to get it up and going. We sent all the equipment, and people learned on vacation. Some we had classes in actual, some basic programming classes, but how to also use programs that would be useful in their lives. And the main goal was because at that time people were afraid of computers. Our main marketing goal was to get people comfortable with the technology so that they would then feel okay about, working with computers in their lives. So that was, it was a very fun thing. And then we built a computer village in the Dominican Republic. And that was just, I have to say, that was just completely over the top, unbelievable. And we had
a computer village in relation to Club Med still?
The Club Med village in the Dominican Republic became an Atari world. And we had tennis tournament organizer, snorkeling encyclopedias, much more extensive class offerings. All of the scheduling of the entire village was available in 3 languages all over the village, in French, Spanish, and English, as examples of some of the things that we did. And it was really unbelievable. And it was way ahead of its time. And that would have been in like 1982.
How long did that collaboration between Atari and Club Med last?
Well, it lasted from literally the beginning, I guess about 3 years. And then when Jack Tramiel took over Atari from Warner, just about everything that I was doing, pretty much evaporated. in terms of those kinds of projects.
Yeah,
So
the interesting, exciting, fun projects.
yes, so
Jack was not interested in that. Yeah.
Well, it was just I'm not saying that as a criticism of the Tramiel family. They took over a sinking ship. My business was profitable. All of the things that I did were profitable at Atari, but the game business was, which I only did one project in the game business, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But all of the things that I was doing, were thriving and growing very fast. And so, but he had a monster on his hands that he had to get under control as fast as possible. And it all happened very fast. And literally, we were told in the morning that we had to be out that day. So there was no time for debriefing. One of the Tramiel sons came to see me and, asked me to tell him about my division. I said, I guess you didn't hear my entire vision was riffed today. And I have to be out of here like as soon as possible. Here are all my files. I had a file drawer with all of our projects, everything in great detail. I said, it's all yours. Here's my phone number if you need to call me. So that didn't, I don't criticize them for that. And he was only following instructions from his dad. So
sure. That was July 84, I think, when you were laid off.
Yes, that would have been in July of 84. Right. And then I spent the next 6 months helping my people getting jobs because I had a RIF package that enabled me to do that. So I just wanted everybody to land on their feet, and people in my division, because we had gone from 10,000 to 1,000 employees, and that people from my division were never rift, but they kept giving us more responsibility. Telling you the end of the story before the beginning of the story, but anyway, so my people knew everything that was going on, and I had literally everyone in my division, and I used to make expansions for my division from the riff list, because the people who were being riffed were just, all of them were amazing. So our division kept growing. Even during that time of the company drastically shrinking.
I'm sorry, I don't know what riffing is.
Reduction in force. What you're basically fired. So back to the beginning. So I was given this assignment first with Club Med and then with the Atari computer camps. And we had, I guess at the peak, close to 20 camps. The camping partners we had were fantastic. They were a group of people who had a franchise with the Weight Watchers organization. And then they had one camp that they owned in the Poconos. And then all the other camps were held on university campuses, which were empty in the summer at that time. And so they used to create these, camps with the theme of Weight Watchers. And now we did the same thing, but with Atari computer camps. And they had a complete athletic, traditional summer camp athletic overnight program for part of the day. And then part of the day was done with computer programming. And we created the Gang of 10, where we picked 10 of the finest teachers interested in microcomputing all over the country, and created a curriculum for the children in the summer. And then we had 80 teachers that were our core people that we brought in and trained. And we trained them not only for the summer camps, but also to be able to do curriculum back at their schools, and for them to also be able to make babies of other teachers. And we had the best of the best. And believe it or not, this was before Apple they were just starting out in the education world. So we were really ahead of them. And who knows where we would have ended up if Jack Tramiel hadn't shut it all down, but he did. Anyway, so it was really fantastic. We had waiting lists to get into the camps. Of course, Atari as a brand was an incredibly hot commodity. So just about anything you stuck that brand on, became an instant success. So the camps were really fantastic, and that was a very fun thing to do. I was a kid who went to summer camp as a kid for 8 weeks in the summer. So this was like sort of reliving all that time of my life.
Nice. So what was your role in the camps?
Oh, I was co-partner with the guys who were doing the camps, and then we did all the computer part of the camp, and then they did the camping part of the camp. But we had ultimate approval over everything because it was using the Atari brand. So we were very careful about how making sure everything was the very highest quality in terms of programming, safety, everything that you can imagine, because we certainly didn't want to have a camper, have a situation where then it reflected back on Atari that in a negative way. So we were in charge of all of that. And I was, I guess, I don't remember if I actually had a title. I was the person in charge from Atari with the joint venture. And then I had people on my team that I had, running the camps. My background was in business. I had an MBA, so I was in charge from the business point of view. And I always was smart enough. That's where I really learned this, to surround myself with people a lot smarter than I was, to be able to do whatever part of a job was necessary, whether it was, marketing, sales, education, computing, manufacturing, whatever it was. I had the best people all around me. And we created an executive management team that would meet every day, to report on whatever. So those were the first 2 projects that I started out with. And the goals of those projects were really principally for marketing purposes and establishing Atari as a brand and a trusted brand in the field of educational computing. So because we were involved with educational computing, our chief scientist, Alan Kay, was very enthusiastic about everything that our division did. And we actually, our offices, we officed in the same building as the research department and Alan, so that we could have incredibly close collaboration, and he could be showing us all the things that were sort of, in the hopper, so that we could then start to incorporate a lot of those things into our projects. So that's one of the reasons that we, everything we did was just completely cool. It was in large part, thanks to Alan Kay and his brilliance. And then my team loved working with all the people in the research department. Then they gave me the one project. They wanted to kick off something called the Atari Club. I don't know if my name ever came up with respect to the Atari Club, but this was a club for kids mainly, and the game division, to get them involved with the games. Mm-hmm. I think it took us 3 months to have 1 million members, and then it just kept growing from there. And then we also sold product. We did.
Was this like a fan club?
It was a combination of a fan club and a direct marketing sales of the products. And we did that joint venture with a sister Warner company called the Franklin Mint. And so we were able to actually have a direct mail marketing and sales operation within the Atari Club. And then you got all kinds of benefits and so forth. So I had these 3 joint ventures going simultaneously in terms of my work initially at Atari. And
was the Atari Club the project in the game business that you had mentioned before?
Yes, that was what it was. It took, I think, less than 6 months, and we were profitable. And every month, the way the Franklin Mint, the business model worked, is you had a monthly mailing and a magazine that we created. that was mailed out all over the world. And the Franklin Mint did the production of the magazine, but we did the creation of the magazine with one of their team members who had a lot of experience in knowing how to do, magazine production and to make it, optimally effective from the point of view of the user. And it was also a very fun, creative project. And after a year, the then president of the game division, wanted to take the Atari Club under his control. So we said, absolutely. And we gave it to him on a silver platter. It was all up and running and tidy and neat and profitable. And then he never did it as well as we did. But anyway, we were passionate about the game business in some aspects of it, but we were more passionate in my group. We were more passionate about all the educational computing aspects. So then the next thing they wanted us to do was to take all of this and actually begin a business addressing the educational marketplace itself. So then the education division was born, and we had it as a separate entity apart from the coin-operated game division and the game division itself.
So this was the Atari Learning Systems group?
It was part of the Atari Learning Systems group, right? Okay. So we principally focused on K through 12, although we did have a university division. And we did work with universities and doing a lot of pioneering work of getting Atari microcomputers and curriculum and so forth into universities as well. But our real passion was with the kids. And and we then springboarded the core of teachers that we had developed through the camps, who were all in, schools all over the United States, to work with us on an ongoing basis. This group of 80 teachers to work with us to really set the standards and the quality. And we did we financed some developers to create software in-house, but we also worked extensively with third-party developers just in order to have a full catalog of software offerings for the computer, and also worked in developing curriculum with the teachers for the teachers to be able to, to work with their children in the classrooms. And we had scholarship programs and anything and everything you can imagine in those early days of wanting to to address that marketplace. We were doing, and we were in neck and neck then with Apple as our chief competitor in addressing schools and whether they be an Atari-based school or an Apple-based school. And we worked with some of the most prestigious school systems in the country, like Sunnyvale as an example, which was probably one of the leading cutting edge school systems for adopting microcomputers and curriculum into their school system. They were one of our lead school systems to be working with as an example. And we did everything was self-contained within our division in terms of our team, marketing, sales, software development. And I had some of the most amazing people heading up each of those groups. And except for the actual manufacturer of the computers. And then Bruce Irvine, who was the head of the computer manufacturing, we did had a deal with him to do internal transfer of the computers for actual purchasing of the computers. But the actual software manufacturing, we did ourselves within our own division for both our internal titles and our external externally financed and co-working for our co-developers. So
what was the most popular educational titles? Do you remember?
Well, I guess we had a version of VisiCalc. I guess that was one of the early, it was like before Excel and spreadsheets, one of the early, we had an Atari version of that and, using that for math. And then we had, programs that were, it wasn't like the game division where, you had a big hit. It was, it was more, more comprehensive in terms of curriculum. So then it depended on what the school wanted or needed, and then we also then they then, as the company was shrinking because of the game business, they then also gave us my division, which was profitable and making money. They gave us the consumer education part of the game part of the business. On the consumer side, we were just working with schools, and then they gave us the consumer business to run that first, just the education things, and then as the company kept shrinking, they gave us everything that was addressing the consumer. And each time they would give us some new big chunk of things to be responsible for. We would have another strategic meeting, and as the company had fewer and fewer resources, we used to hold those because we always did those. Usually we did them in Paro Dunes, those kinds of projects. But then we started doing them at my house because we didn't have the money to go to Paro Dunes. We had, and I think every 2 months we would have another strategy session because they would give us more and more responsibility. And I was always mystified why they kept me, as they kept shutting things down and letting other people who seemed to be more experienced, go. But my divisions were always making money. So maybe, and we had such a cohesive group of people, and I really protected my people from the rest of the chaos that was going on in the rest of the company, other than to make them aware and to say, make sure your resume is ready to go. Because I said, we don't know literally from one day to the next whether we're going to be here. And I said, if you want to leave, you have my blessing to leave. We totally understand. And nobody left. Nobody left.
Wow.
I share that with you because it was so magical what we were doing and how we were doing it. And we were such a family and such a team in my division that nobody wanted it to end. And, they were ready to go with their resumes when that day finally came. But nobody wanted it to end because it was so incredible.
That whole situation must have been overwhelming. I mean, just with them piling on new divisions and new work on you over and over again, and the company shrinking, and
but the company was shrinking, but we were growing in our division. We were growing in every way in terms of responsibilities, the number of people, revenues, profits. I mean, new products. I mean, you name it, and we were thriving. So we were sort of this, and we actually went. Ray Kassar left, and Jim Morgan came to run the company. And my division said, "Why don't we ask them to spin us out as a separate company, and they can still own, even 51%, but we would have guarantees that we would be able to, because we were self-sustaining. We were not only profitable, we were cash flow positive. So we didn't even need money from them. And we voted, my team voted, and they voted that we wanted to get spun out. And I went and I had a meeting with Jim Morgan, who was our new CEO, and he begged us to stay. He came, he spoke directly to my team, and he begged us to stay. And he had this whole list of reasons why it was in the best interest of the company for us to stay, and how we would be sort of pulling the rug out under everything if we did. And he left, and we had a vote. I was very democratic, and everybody voted to support Jim Morgan and to stay. It probably, in retrospect, was a mistake, because we wouldn't have been, sucked down with everybody else if we had been spun out.
So yeah, that was going to be my next question. What was that a mistake, and what would have happened? So
Who knows? Who
yeah.
knows whether over time we would have had the resources to compete with Apple?
Mhm.
That's just a big question mark. But we were ahead of them at the time, so we might have, but we might have needed outside capital in order to really compete, especially on the consumer side of the business, which at that time we were managing that part. We weren't just an institutional sales business. We were also a consumers. So we had two different groups. We had the group that sold to schools. We had the K through 12 people. We had the university people, and then we had the direct to consumer, businesses. So those really require different skills and completely different kinds of sales cycles and different talents. And so we were in the beginning, it was overwhelming, but then everything was moving so fast that you just didn't have time. You didn't have time to go into the doldrums, or to worry about well, am I under too much stress, or am I, you just did the work. You just woke up every day, and everybody was so excited about what was going on in our business that there was never anything but support. And I created this senior management team so that everybody was helping everybody else in terms of ideas. So nobody felt alone. Everybody felt very supported in terms of challenges that would come up. And if we needed extra help from somewhere else, we would always, make sure that we got that for whoever it was that was facing whatever challenge it was. If we were an independent company, and then Atari went out of business, and Jack Tramiel took over the computer business, and what would happen in terms of our ability to get hardware? Would he have supported us? That would have been a major question. Would he have honored whatever agreement we had with the old Atari Inc.? So it was just would have been impossible to predict. Whether were just too many wild cards. Whether it was the Tramiel wild card, or whether it was Apple had tremendous backing. And all of a sudden the backing for Atari was Warner Communications. If all of a sudden Warner wasn't there, what would have happened to us as an independent entity? I think we would have been fine in the beginning, but over the long term, who knows whether we would have been able to survive. Mainly, I think, because of the two things. One, the hardware, and being able to get the hardware at an attractive price to be able to resell it to our customers, in the institutional educational part of the business, particularly. I don't think we would have cared about the consumer part, as long as we were able to, maintain some kind of relationship to know about the upcoming technology, so that we would be able to produce software that was compatible with whatever the new products were. That'd be another question, whether they would have allowed that to happen. And then the second thing is having sufficient marketing muscle to be able to continue to support the brand with consumers. And, now Apple in those days had its ups and downs too. So, who knows what would have happened if they had a vigorous competitor.
Why did Atari lose in schools versus the Apple II ultimately?
Well, we basically evaporated. we were out of business. Once Tramiel took over the company, he had to pick his spots for
Sure.
what was going
And
to,
education was not a priority for
education
him.
was not even on the list, I
So
don't think.
you feel that, I mean, as of
we were
early
literally
1984, you
shut
were still
down.
neck and neck. There was still a chance.
There would have been a chance, but then, once Tramiel took over the company, we were shut down. So it was good for Apple because their chief competitor just evaporated overnight.
Sure.
Mhm.
Your name came up recently when I was talking with the founder of the Capitol Children's Museum. She said, Ann Lewin said that you were the liaison with them from
Mhm.
Atari, and Atari donated some number, probably 30 computers to the museum. Can you talk some about that relationship?
We as I said, we were passionate about kids and educational computing, and the Capitol Children's Museum was one of the leaders in wanting to begin to introduce the technology to kids, and it was great marketing for us to have such a prestigious organization be willing to have our computers there in front of the kids. And the kids were magical. They didn't need any instruction. We had a display in the corporate headquarters. I used to go watch the kids. They would just, they would have these like little stations for them, and they would come up with no instructions, and within minutes, they would be doing whatever software package was on the computer, and they were just able to get it like that. So this was a great opportunity at the Capitol Children's Museum to have this kind of display that we had in our headquarters, and to make these kinds of products available for kids to try when they were at the museum. And not only for the kids, but for the parents of the kids, and for the parents to see, oh, this is an Atari computer. And it was the same idea that we had, whether it was in our camps or the Club Med joint venture, or Capitol Children's Museum, and other schools that we worked with, to get our equipment in front of the kids. It was a great product, those early computers.
And then maybe the parents later, when they're buying a computer, they'll see the Atari and go, oh, I know this. I've seen this before. My kids know
Correct.
it.
It gave us credit, because this was a problem for us in the computer side of the business, because people associated Atari with games, and games with fun and not seriousness. So anything we could do from a marketing point of view to create credibility around the Atari computer as a real computer was to our advantage in terms of the growth of our business and the acceptance of our products.
Did you have anything to do with the Atari Youth Advisory Board?
I was not on that board. And I think Alan Kay was involved with that. And, we worked very closely with Alan. I think we may have nominated some people to that board, but that was not part of our responsibilities. But the Atari Institute, which was headed by Ted Kahn,
yes,
was part of our division. And he was a direct collaboration between Alan Kay and his group and our group, and also had his own philanthropic strategy. And so he was working with the Youth Advisory Board. I guess indirectly, because the Atari Institute was part of our division. But we gave him, he's brilliant. Ted Kahn is brilliant. He's still brilliant, as is his brother, Bob, who worked inside of my division directly with many leadership responsibilities. But, we gave Ted, a lot of rope, and he was also, very connected to the senior management of the corporation because of the kind of work that he was doing.
Mm-hmm. And the Atari Institute was a marketing arm as well. I mean, it was more marketing than philanthropic, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
but the intention was to do good work.
Sure. Yeah.
Mhm. It
Uh,
had the benefit of marketing, and it was not unlike uh, the joint venture with Club Med, which was directly a marketing activity and was not meant to make money for the company. The camps were a profitable um, joint venture, but the Atari Institute, the goals of the Atari Institute, principal goals, did have a marketing benefit, but those were not the strategic goals of the Institute. Were not marketing, business, profit, all of that. It was really, the goals were to do good work.
And speaking of marketing, you were executive producer of a movie called The Magic Room,
I was
which was a
with
beautiful
Bob and
movie,
Lucy.
a beautiful movie, but an extended ad for Atari computer camps. Tell me everything about that, please.
Lauren Dunbar came to me with this idea and introduced me to Bob Elstrom and Lucy Hilmer and many other filmmakers. And I picked Bob and Lucy to do this work with. And we had, the idea was to make a documentary film about the Atari computer camps to, make sure that it was preserved, the work of the camps was, and what was actually happening at the camps and with educational computing would be preserved for posterity. So we did a full-length documentary film, an hour film, and then we did a shorter version of the film that could be shown in schools more easily, because you could build an entire class around it. I think it was 18 minutes. And then we did a 3-minute version that was like an ad, and which could be made into a 1-minute version. The company could use for actual part of the advertising campaigns. And we actually worked with our advertising group in order to, to produce those very short segments for ad purposes. But it was a very fun project, and it was done principally at our San Diego campsite. And Bob and Lucy were based in Northern California. They became, and still are, very close friends. And they're amazing. Bob Elstrom is one of the great documentary filmmakers of our time. Lucy is a fine art photographer, as well as, she was Bob started as a cameraman, but Lucy was doing the writing, script writing, and the actual camera work, along with Bob for the production. And then Michael, and his last name should not escape me, but it is escaping me. He won the editing award for Amadeus. He was our editor, and we had a great sound person, and they all worked for almost nothing in order to do this project. And it was never commercialized as a film, which is a shame, because it was really a terrific film, and showed what life was like at the computer camps, but also really showed serious learning. And it's interesting, because I learned from that later. I went on to be chair of the board of what was then called Yosemite National Institute's, now called Nature Bridge, which is an environmental education partner with the National Park Service. And we principally work with K through 12 kids. And I was recruited to that board by Gary Mitchell, who was then the CEO, because of my experience with educational computing. And we learned in our computer camps that experiential education with disadvantaged children particularly was like magic in terms of their learning ability. And when later at Yosemite National Institute's, now Nature Bridge, we did collaboration with the folks at the Stanford School of Education to study this seriously. about experiential education through our programs at, in the national parks. And what I observed at Atari was in fact also true with environmental education. When you take kids who are from disadvantaged communities, that's part of the program at Yosemite National Institute's now Nature Bridge that I started. We called it the Diversity Initiative because initially we had no kids with disadvantaged communities really coming to our programs because we had to have the programs be able to pay for themselves in order to stay sustained. So I started the Diversity Initiative, and today, a third of the kids are coming to Nature Bridge are scholarshiped because of the work that I started, and over $1 million of scholarships are given every year. So, but we found that just like with educational computing, that when you take disadvantaged kids and you put them out in nature, there were challenges relating to that. That's a sort of a separate conversation, but the actual learning component that they were going to learn, they learn on par with their advantaged counterparts. And likewise, girls who drop out of science and math in middle school, when you put them in an experiential education setting, they perform on par with the boys. In fact, they're actually a little ahead of the boys. So anyway, but all of that, of understanding that really came from observing the children, especially at Atari computer camps, where we scholarshiped a lot of kids, and they came from disadvantaged communities, and we saw that they could learn just like everybody else. Didn't really matter where you came from. And that was a real revelation, for children, these young children, whether it was computer education or environmental education. And I would imagine that if you had other experiential learning applications, that you'd be able to accomplish the same things with kids.
Wow. So there was a collaboration marketing thing with General Mills Post cereals called Catch On to Computers that I believe you were involved with. Can you tell me about that?
My marketing team, I believe, was one of their projects. I'm just sort of smiling because when I was a securities analyst, I followed those companies as one of my responsibilities. But it was anything that we could do that was innovative, to reach more consumers, to establish the Atari computer as a viable and serious computer. And those companies had cereal boxes that were in every household in the United States. So it was a good collaboration. And I think that our advertising department was also, one of the drivers of that project.
So I think I've gone down all the list of the projects that I know you worked on when you're at Atari. What other things did you do that I don't know about yet?
I think that, Atari grew so fast, and it was in so many different buildings and even in different adjacent cities. That one of the things that I really wanted to do was to protect the integrity of my division and my business, and keeping our people, all together. And it would have been very easy to have one group over here and one group over here and one group over here. And then as the company, I guess I was there about 18 months before the computer division, the game division imploded. So then once that started to happen, and then things were shrinking, it became easier keep us consolidated. But in that first 18 months, it was a real fight to keep us all together, and and to make sure that everybody was still able to collaborate with each other, you know, rather than just be in distinct pods but separated from each other. And my boss wanted me to sit with him in where he was, and I needed to be with my people. And so I said, okay, I'll make an agreement with you. I'll try it for 3 months, and then but I also want an office, with my people. And after about 2 weeks, I could see that was not going to work. So I kept my 3-month promise of keeping my office with him. And then I said, this is ridiculous. Anytime you need to have a meeting with me, I'll come, but I need to be with my people. Everything's just moving too fast, and I can't be sitting in some ivory tower. So I also got involved in my first sexual abuse case at Atari.
Oh my, what happened?
Probably not something you would not to be named, but one person who was in a senior capacity was doing some things he shouldn't have been doing, and the HR people came to me as a trusted person to work with them, to work with the victims, and to work with the executive to try to resolve this to everybody's benefit, which I did. And in a later role, I was called on to do that again, not at Atari, but in a different part of my life. I had Atari to thank for sort of giving me the early education of how to handle those kind of situations.
It seems, although of course not right, it seems almost inevitable in a culture that at times, I've heard stories about, there was the hot tub and there was people doing cocaine in the bathrooms, depending on the era, I'm sure it became more.
Not in my division.
So
I have to tell you.
But there were people certainly misbehaving in various ways, and
And you heard that after the years of Nolan Bushnell?
Heavily in the years of Nolan Bushnell, but I don't think, my sense is that culture didn't entirely go away after when Warner took over.
Ray Kassar was a pretty straight shooter.
Yeah.
In terms of those kinds of ethics, I don't think he would have tolerated it if he knew about it. Certainly wasn't going on in my division. I'm not going to tell you that nobody ever smoked pot on their own time. I didn't, but maybe some of my people did, but most of them not. We had, my head of marketing was a guy named Mike Noblaw, who was brilliant, beyond brilliant. And anytime something didn't go exactly as we hoped, he would say, remember, it's only a movie. So it's became one of our great lines. Remember, it's only a movie. And he was a theater director, which he did as a hobby. And we used to all go to all of his plays that he produced and directed. And that's an example of the kind of, love and support that was part of my division. People supported each other. We had, family tragedies that, happened among our different folks that worked in the division, and, whatever was necessary to help support people, we did it, whether it meant bringing their kids to work or during a time when they needed to get themselves back on their feet, or having people babysit, for their kids outside of work, whatever it took to support each other. We did within our division. That's why I said it was really like a family. And it spurred enormous creativity within the workplace. And I think that's one of the reasons that we were profitable, because, there was, everybody had a voice, didn't matter what your job was. And you were able to bring forth ideas. And, lots of people have good ideas. And so people were able to do that. And especially if it pertained to their particular job, we supported them in implementing a lot of these innovations. And so that was, I think it was one of the reasons people loved working there. They felt like they were really part of something.
You said in our pre-interview chat that it was the best job you ever had.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there was just nothing like the creativity, the excitement of the growth, the building something, doing something good in your actual work, of helping children, especially, and teachers, to realize being better at whatever it was they were doing, to introducing these new innovative tools. There was just no end to the creativity. And that was, not that I haven't done a lot of creative things in my other work. I guess when I was chair of Y&I, that was also an incredible time, but it wasn't a job. It was volunteer work, not NGO volunteer work. So I wouldn't put it in the same category. And I love being a securities analyst and a portfolio manager, and going to Hollywood, and as a young kid being picked up in a limousine and taken to meetings and like things that I didn't even know existed. All that was great fun, but there was just nothing like this sense of family, and this combination of creativity, business, and achieving something important all at the same time. And working with people who were, and being passionate about what it is you were doing, and having everybody around you feel the same way.
What do you do today?
I'm married to a different person than I was then. And almost 14 years ago, my husband, who was one of the co-founders of Bessemer Venture Partners in Silicon Valley, one of the early venture capital firms. Anyway, the two of us started a venture capital firm in India called Footprint Ventures. And that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years. And we're now winding that down. We just have one company left in our portfolio. So doing that, and I have a recurrence of my breast cancer, which I got for the first time in 1991. And 27 and a half years later, I slipped on some black ice and had the good fortune of getting an MRI that discovered I had lesions in 8 places in my bones.
Wow.
So I do a lot of things to, they can't cure what I have, but they can treat what I have. So I do a lot of my time is spent in what my niece calls self-care, but self-care is things like doing yoga 5 times a week, and weight training, all for my bone strength. And I take medicines that make my bones naturally weaker. So I have to do a lot of things to make my bones stronger, as an example. And then things that I do to boost my immune system, whether it's exercise or diet or other treatments that I do at home. And so that's what I'm, I guess, self-care and winding down Footprint Ventures and keeping up with family and friends, and then having an occasional curveball come my way when Kay calls to to do an interview about ancient history. Right.
I have that effect. Yes. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your health issues, and I thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
If you could send a message to the people who grew up with Atari computers and they're still using them today, what would you tell them?
I would say keep exploring and keep going to the edge. and using the technology to expand your mind, body, and heart.
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome, Kay.